Hello and welcome to the Clinical Liver Diseases video series. CLD is an official digital learning publication of the AASLD. I'm Julius Wilder, an assistant professor of medicine and associate editor for social media for CLD. I actually work here at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. I'm honored to have with me today Dr. Elizabeth Yu, associate clinical professor of pediatrics in the Division of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition, and associate fellowship program director at UC San Diego. She is the stellar author of a recent CLD publication entitled Epidemiology of Pediatric Nonalcoholic Fatty Liver Disease, a topic that is really important for us as adult hepatologists to begin to engage and understand more about. And so we're really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you, Dr. Yu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julius. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet the weather's great in UC San Diego. It's pretty cold out here in Durham right now, so I'm jealous. So a couple questions for you about this article, because again, I really want to emphasize that I think this is a topic that we don't engage enough in as adult hepatologists. What is the prevalence of NAFLD in children, and how does that compare to the prevalence of Nash, for instance?
Okay, great question, Julia. So there's multiple measures of the prevalence of NAFLD in children that exist in the literature. So ranging from 9.6% in SCALE, which is a San Diego-based histology study in children in the general population, to 4.5% in a New York-based histology study, also in children in the general population. And globally, prevalence was estimated to be about 7.6% in a meta-analysis. So if you combine all of those and take it together, we can say that the prevalence of NAFLD in children ranges from about 5 to 10% of children in the general population. So other factors, such as sex, race and ethnicity, and age, they also influence the prevalence of NAFLD. So an example, prevalence is actually higher in boys than girls, with a prevalence of about 11.1% in boys versus 7.9% in girls. And there's many factors that we won't go into now. So race and ethnicity, so children of Hispanic ethnicity at 11.8% and Asian race at 10.2% have higher prevalence of NAFLD compared to white children at 8.6%.
Wow.
And yeah, in the United States, prevalence of NAFLD is lowest in children of African American race at just 1.5%.
So when you think about that, the NAFLD versus Nash, like that, comparing those two, is there a dramatic difference with Nash versus NAFLD in terms of the prevalence in children?
That's true. Yeah. And so in Nash, the prevalence estimates also vary by the population studied, as you would imagine. So in SCALE, the same study, the San Diego histology study, the prevalence was about 25% had Nash, as opposed to the 9.6% with NAFLD. And then in other studies, a 2013 tertiary care center study, about up to 54% of children had biopsy-proven Nash. And of course, this is a tertiary care center, so you'd expect the numbers to be higher. And then in a 2018 multi-center study, about 26% had definite Nash. So in combination, we can estimate that about 20 to 50% of children with NAFLD have Nash at the time of diagnosis.
Well, then, given the surprising numbers, honestly, in terms of the burden of NAFLD and Nash, just not having that perspective as an adult hepatologist, can you talk a little bit about the risk factors? You got a little bit into it. So what are the risk factors for NAFLD?
Yeah. So there's definitely a multitude of risk factors. I think we're just talking about age is, older age, you'll have a higher prevalence of NAFLD versus younger age versus the prevalence is about 17.3% in kiddos ages 15 to 19 years, as opposed to 0.7% in kids ages 2 to 4. So I think that's going to change, but that's what we have for now. And so the number one risk factor really is obesity. It's the largest risk factor for NAFLD in children. So though obesity and NAFLD are often associated, I just really want to emphasize the point, Julius, that they are not concomitant. So in a recent study of children with obesity, they found that 26%, or only about 1 in 4 of those children, had NAFLD.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So the in utero environment is another risk factor. So children of very low birth weight and high birth weight, so both ends of the spectrum, may have increased risk of developing NAFLD compared to normal birth weight children. And finally, of course, genetics and heritability, but you'll hear more about that in the section of genetics.
Yeah. And so, that was sort of around the sort of NAFLD in children. So are the risk factors for Nash in children different versus those for NAFLD?
Yeah, so they found that, of course, there's a multitude of risk factors as well for progression to Nash, and these include prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, birth weight, just like we spoke about in NAFLD, but this time high birth weight is associated with increased risks of regression to Nash versus low birth weight is associated with increased risk of advanced fibrosis. Of course, the microbiome, because dysbiosis is a risk factor for development of Nash, as it's risk factor for many things. Obstructive sleep apnea and hypoxemia, they're associated with greater hepatic fibrosis. And then finally, hypothalamic dysfunction and panhypopit are known risk factors. And the theory behind that is that there's increased leptin levels that are found in panhypopit, and that kind of stimulates a pro-inflammatory and fibrotic inducing environment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Yu, thank you so much. This has actually been an extremely informative interview. And it's so interesting seeing the interplay of these various risk factors that drive NAFLD and Nash and how different the two can be. On behalf of all of us on the CLD team, I hope you viewers have found this interview of Dr. Yu for her wonderful article, Epidemiology of Pediatric Non-Alcoholic Fatty Liver Disease, helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Yu, again, for joining us. And for more information about pediatric NAFLD and other liver-related topics, please visit us at www.cldlearning.com. Thank you for watching.